Anyway, how are you all?
I got my first shot 2 days ago. And I did not expect it at all. Apparently enough people have refused to get the shot that there's some for the rest of us. Because I'm not 65 yet, and my medical condition consists of obesity, which I don't think should qualify me for anything. But it put me on the 1D list, and I got my shot. I felt guilty, but I did it anyway.
I got both, so I'm happy. I understand that 2 weeks after the second shot, it's supposed to be up to 95% at that point in time.
Yeah, it's been 3 weeks since my second shot, so I am fully vaccinated. Yay!
Yay! Well, and you know, I saw one of the doctors that they always have on cable news. He's always on, but he was saying, because somebody was talking about Johnson & Johnson and how the efficacy or efficiency or whatever that number is lower than the other two. Should people be concerned if they end up with the Johnson & Johnson shot? And he said, no, because the thing is look, nothing's 100%, and you could still get COVID. You could still contract it. But the reality is you're not going to get sick. You're not going to get, your lungs aren't going to fill with fluid. You're not going to go to the emergency room. You're not going to be put on a ventilator. And so while I'm like, knock on wood that I don't get it because of this, I also am like, but I know if I do, I'll be okay. There's just so much relief. It's just relief.
I'm still antisocial.
Good morning, everybody. It's just slightly after 10. We'll begin shortly. I would like to thank everyone for joining us on this February morning, the last weekend of February. And I hope that all of you came through the winter storm, the multi-generational winter storm, relatively okay. I know the state did not fare so well, but hopefully most of you came through with your house mostly intact, which I think is the best that we can hope for. Like I said, we'll begin shortly. Judge Garrison is going to do the Civics 301, the Judiciary. Before that, we will have the County Attorney, Christian Menefee, talk to us as well. But I will begin about 3 minutes, 5 after, and we will begin the business meeting. So again, good morning and welcome, everyone.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see y'all.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, it's Roy and Bobby. We're here.
Good morning. Laura, to your question, they're on our website. The Civics series materials. Oh, sorry, they're on YouTube. The recordings are available.
Yeah, yes, if you go on our website to the news section, Civics 201 that we had last month, there's a link to the video on YouTube. You can also search YouTube for our channel, and most of our recent meetings are there as well.
Give it 1 more minute. Multitasking here. Okay. We will start shortly. Okay. Again, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February meeting of the Southwest Democrats. I'm Adrian Ozuna, and welcome on behalf of the Southwest Democrats Board. Again, we will be having
Where's the volume?
We will have Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee this morning, as well as Judge Tanya Garrison presenting Civics 301, the Judiciary, as part of our continuing education about how civics works in across multiple spheres that encompass the United States government. So we will go there. But first, we will let elected officials say hello. Eric, are you ready? Okay.
All right, I see Judge Singer is online.
Yes, how you all doing this morning? Adrian, thank you very much for having our meeting and letting us in. This is David Singer, Judge County Criminal Court number 14. I don't want to take up a lot of time, but just saying hi to everybody and looking forward to the program.
Thank you, Judge.
We have Judge Silverman.
Judge Silverman. Okay.
All right, Judge Semino.
Well, good morning, everybody. Judge Semino, Probate Court number 1. Good to see you all.
Good to see you, Judge.
Good morning. This is Judge Silverman. I apologize for butting in. I unmuted and thought I had unmuted. But anyway, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Looking forward to hearing the meeting.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, Judge Dunson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Judge Linda Dunson, presiding judge of the 309th Family District Court, and I hope you guys' day have started out wonderfully. So thus far.
Thank you very much.
Judge Engelhardt.
Morning, everybody. I'm Mike Engelhardt. I'm the judge of the 151st Civil District Court. I've been the judge there for over 12 years. It's very nice to be with you. Good morning. Looking forward to the program. And also, please stay tuned for an announcement in a month or two about 2022.
Look forward to it. Good morning.
Judge Cornelio.
Good morning, everybody. This is Nata Cornelio, the judge of the 351st District Court. I just started January 1st, so I wanted to thank everybody for your support last year and say good morning.
Morning.
And the last one I see is Judge Dollinger.
Judge Dollinger.
Oops, sorry. Let me unmute. Sorry about that. Unprecedented, me going unmuted, right? Or muted. This is Scott Dollinger. I'm judge of the 189th Civil District Court. There's 24 civil district courts in Harris County. I split them up between cycles, and this next cycle in 2022 will be the Civil 10, and I'm one of those. Happy to be here with you this morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Glad you could join us. Okay.
Yes, sir.
With those introductions, let's move on to the business meeting so we can proceed to the the fun part of the day. On the screen, everyone should be able to see the minutes from the last meeting, the January 23rd, 2021 general meeting. Can you all see those? You need to read them.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
So moved. Or second, whatever you need.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting the minutes as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you all very much. Treasurer's report. As of February 27th, 2021, this covers the period from January 22nd, 2021 through February 26th, 2021. The beginning balance was $5,802.01. We've had membership dues of $855, additional donations of $260 for total deposits of $1,115. We've had withdrawals for Zoom subscription, web hosting, and credit card processing fees for $119.60, bringing the ending balance to $6,797.41. There are outstanding transactions. We're expecting another ActBlue disbursement of $192.08, which would bring the current club balance up to $6,989.49. Is there a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second, thank you. All in favor of approving the treasurer's report?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Because we have a full agenda, I'm just going to go straight. I will give a president's announcements at the end. I want to get everybody else in and plenty of time. So but it is board elections. The nominations have been placed and seconded. So the slate is as presented. Fran Watson for social media, Soren Valverde for outreach, Melanie Miles for parliamentarian, Eric Manning for treasurer, Kara DeRocha for secretary, Jill Moffitt for vice president, and myself, Adrian Ozuna, for president. As it is a slate, nominations are closed. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the board by acclamation. Is there a motion?
I so move, Bobby Cohen.
Thank you, Bobby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Eric Manning. All in favor of adopting the board for the 2021 cycle, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. The board is approved. And now that the board's been approved, I would like the board members to say a few words. So I talk all the time. So Jill?
Okay, yes, since we have the pandemic, we are getting vaccinated, but we still have to be safe. I am just encouraging people to support the club by paying dues, by attending our Zoom meetings, and supporting whatever fundraisers we may have. You know, as membership, I would like to see the club grow even during a pandemic. So all of you precinct chairs, consider inviting your trustee members to this Zoom meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. Kara?
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be able to serve this organization again for the next year. Thank you so much for including me. And I just wanted to say, I've kind of unofficially taken a little bit of a year-long break from my education advocacy, but as of this past week, I am back in the game. So anyway, so you'll see me more at board meetings and more up-to-date and well-versed in what's going on with HISD.
Thank you. Eric?
Good morning, everybody. I just want to say thank you for keeping me on as your treasurer and putting up with me for the last several years. We tried to streamline the process to get the memberships registered and paid for each year, introducing an invoicing process. We're always open to suggestions. If there's anything that you'd like us to look into or to try, if you have any meeting suggestions or anything at all, our doors are open, so to speak. You can always email the club or contact us one of us directly.
Thank you. Melanie, congratulations, our new parliamentarian.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm so excited to be here. I am looking forward to serving this year with all of the other board members and getting to know everyone even better. As parliamentarian, I'm here to maintain order and to answer any questions of the president with regards to parliamentary procedure and how the meetings should or can be run more efficiently. Since we're in Zoom, it's not a whole lot of, I guess, interaction, but if anyone has any questions or any suggestions that I can have, and maybe we can take this time to brush up on our parliamentary procedures for when we start meeting again, that would be kind of cool. So let me know, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Thank you very much. Soren, are you here? I know he runs his own business, so sometimes that's a hit or miss proposition on Saturday mornings.
He was here earlier. I think I saw him sign on, but he may have to leave.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. He's here.
Soren, say a few words. Okay.
I think he's muted.
He's muted. Well, then we'll go with Fran, the wonderful Fran Watson.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you again for trusting me to be a part of the membership, be part of the leadership. I know that we as a board had a lengthy discussion on our social media policies and implementing some procedures, and so I look forward to making sure those get implemented and work behind the scenes to get our posts together. So thank you again. This is a wonderful group, and so just proud to be a part of it.
Okay. With that, our esteemed Harris County Attorney, Christian Menefee, is on. Originally, this discussion was going to be about some policy changes that he implemented that he promised when he was running. However, we may have a few other subjects to cover quickly. So Christian, Mr. County Attorney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adrian, and it's so great to see everyone. I consider Southwest Dems to be kind of one of my home organizations because one of the first political speeches I ever gave, I met Adrian and Eric and had great conversation with them. And so it's so good to see so many friends, all the elected officials on, Melanie. I feel like I know everybody in the room, which is a rare occasion in politics. Oh my gosh, I've been in office for 8 weeks and this has been insane. The two main things I want to talk to you about are two things that were done directly. Well, I guess I can talk about three, two of which were directly in response to Winter Storm Uri and the malfeasance that we saw from folks in Austin. And then the other thing was something that was related to a campaign promise that we got done, which substantially affects the area that you all live in. So I'll start with that one. Earlier this year, really dating back to the campaign, I talked a lot about the sex work injunction that my predecessor had initiated, which was effectively, you all know, out in the Bissonnet tract, there's sex work that goes on out there and it's open and obvious. And it's kind of a tricky thing to navigate, right? Because on the one hand, you don't want to put the women, many of whom are victims of human trafficking, in a worse position than they're already currently in. But then on the other hand, there are folks who live in the area who see sex work going on out in the open, right? It's not like folks are paying for services and then going back to a hotel room. In many instances, it's happening right there out in the street. We have to find a comprehensive solution to it, but the previous lawsuit that was going on would basically target the women, many of whom were victims. So what my office did was the same thing that I promised to do on the campaign trail, which was we dismissed all those women from that lawsuit. The women being dragged in that lawsuit, I think, was one, unconstitutional, and two, it's put them in a tough financial situation. If they get brought into the lawsuit, they have to go get attorneys. If they don't pay the fines, they could be subject to more fines and potentially jail time, and it was an end around for the criminal justice system. So I think us dismissing them was a winning situation for individual rights, but we still have to find a solution to what goes on in the Bissonnet tract. So now to all the stuff that's gone on in the past 2 weeks. We had a bunch of stuff on our plate 2 weeks ago that we were very excited about doing, some of which you'll see here in the next coming weeks, environmental justice stuff, fighting back against the state. And then of course, Winter Storm Uri hit, and that just shook everything up for folks all across the state of Texas. I'm sure many, if not all of the folks in this group right now lost power and water. My wife and I lost power at 3 a.m. on Monday and didn't get it back until that Thursday. But it was an incredibly sad situation. Many of you know that folks all across this county experience outages. We've seen upwards of 24 deaths that happened in or around Harris County. Folks were freezing in their homes, trying to keep their families safe. It was a very serious situation. But early on, there were some indications that some of this could have been mitigated. In 2011, Texas experienced a hard freeze event. It wasn't as substantial as Winter Storm Uri, but it was a serious thing that occurred. And as part of that, afterwards, all of the agencies from the state to folks at the federal government announced that they were conducting investigations. The Public Utility Commission, which is a 3-person agency that oversees the private entity that manages the electricity board, they launched an investigation. FERC launched an investigation. Long story short, some of the recommendations that came from that investigation was two things that are important here. One, facilities involved in the supply of power need to weatherize their facilities to ensure that they can withstand hard freeze events. This is the federal government telling state of Texas and its power grid, hey, you need to winterize your facilities. And two, we need to have more reserve capacity so that in the event that another extreme weather event happens, we're able to still supply power in a substantial way. Of course, those recommendations were not properly heeded. It's part of the reason why we are where we are today. Soon after the events of last week happened, you saw many state agencies announce investigations. Of course, the governor instructed the legislature to announce an investigation. You saw the PUC, which this is incredibly ironic, announced its own investigation. When we know that some of the malfeasance came from that body, I guess they're going to investigate themselves. And then, of course, the Attorney General, who was in Utah when the storm happened, announced his own investigation, which I suppose he would conduct from afar. We were the first local government through the Harris County Attorney's Office to announce our own investigation. And we did it for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, given what happened in 2011, we know that the state had some opportunity to do the right thing and fix some of these issues, and they didn't do so. And two, we've seen all the way since the secret recordings of Speaker Dennis Bond and former Speaker Dennis Bond, to the actions that the governor took against Chris Hollins in the clerk's office during drive-through voting, to many other instances of the Attorney General fighting against Harris County, that the state is working to undermine local government. So it's important for us folks who are elected here in Harris County to protect the interests of our residents. So we've launched an investigation into what happened, who said what went wrong, and whether anything could have been done to avoid or mitigate the circumstances that happened. The good news is there's been some really great testimony that's come out of the Texas legislative hearings thus far. I don't know if you all have had the opportunity to tune into that, but the most alarming things that I've heard thus far, one was from the CEO of NRG when asked by a state representative. This state representative was very forward in his questioning. He was one of the few who was very forward in his questioning. He said, hey, I don't want to hear all that about processes and all this technical terms. I want to know who messed up. And the CEO of NRG began to list an exhaustive list of folks who were probably in the wrong. And he lists the group of folks at fault to include fuel suppliers, power generators, utility companies, the PUC, and ERCOT. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the ballgame. That's everybody who's involved in the process of providing electricity to everyday people in their homes and in their businesses. That was a very startling admission. Certainly, if I was a lawyer for the energy companies, I would have told them there's no way you can get up there and testify on the record that you're all at fault, but he did. And then we heard from the CEO of Calpine, which is one of the larger power generators, something similar, that Calpine had 2 plants that failed because of winterization issues. Their processes failed. So we're getting some very good information just through the public hearing. So we're gonna scour the transcripts of the public hearings to see what we can find out. But then we'll also be sending over document requests to everybody involved in the process of providing power to people. And then from there, pursuing legal action if there is any. That has been really taking up a lot of time. And then the other thing was Judge Hidalgo and my office partnered on a price gouging effort. We began to see anecdotal evidence on the internet of companies price gouging. To me, this is just a really detestable thing, to take advantage, right, of your neighbors, your fellow Harris County residents during a winter storm, a disaster, and to sell. Some of the folks, we've seen people selling 24 packs of water at $50, right? 30% increases on gasoline. So we put together a task force in conjunction with the judge's office, and we were able to stamp out all the price gouging that was reported to us. Now, obviously, a large percentage of the reports are stuff that isn't really price gouging, but for the stuff that really was, we sent investigators to the facilities. We had lawyers send cease and desist letters, and we were able to get a lot of people to correct their actions. So it has been a phenomenal effort by the great people we have in the office. I'm actually now on Tuesday headed to Austin to testify at the request of State Representative, who's a Democrat, Chris Turner, to testify before the Business Industry Committee on the great work that we did here in Harris County on price gouging and what changes to the law can help us prevent those kind of actions or stamp down harder on bad actors in the future. Needless to say, folks, it has been 8 weeks and it has been crazy. But I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to serve. I feel like now we've been kind of trial tested, and we know that in the future, we'll be prepared to handle everything. One of the things that I've been doing is running around singing the praises of Judge Lena Hidalgo. Obviously, I'm not on the ballot in 2022, but she will be. But I can tell you that having been the lawyer for, I see Judge Dollinger is on here as well. Having been the lawyer for Judge Dollinger, Judge Hidalgo, Commissioner's Court, Judge Hidalgo is killing it, y'all. Like, I can't imagine taking on so many emergencies and natural disasters out the gate, and is serving as the executive for the county. So they're doing great work there. I'm proud to be their lawyer. I'm proud to be the lawyer representing your interests. Thank you for allowing me to come speak to you today. And Adrian, if you'd like, I can take on any questions now.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to get a few questions in. Bobby Cohen had one in the chat. Bobby? Okay.
No, I actually see it. I'll read it out loud and then I'll answer it. First of all, hey, Bobby, I'm glad to hear. I saw online that you're feeling better and that things are going well. Good to hear from you. The question is regarding variable electricity pricing. What does state price gouging statutes? Why do state price gouging statutes not apply to these rates? That's a great question, Bobby. So the law for price gouging in Texas falls under a statute called the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. And effectively, they changed the law to say that anytime there's a disaster declaration made by the president or the governor, you cannot sell necessities at an excessive price. The question of whether electricity falls into the necessities, right, definition right now is something that has not been decided by the courts. My guess is when you take that to the court, they're going to say that it does not, but for a different reason than you think. Obviously, electricity is a necessity, right? But I think what they would say is it doesn't apply because that's not what the legislature intended when they passed the law, one. And two, the law is very clear that pricing for electricity falls within the purview of the Public Utility Commission. So this is that three-person body I told you about that is appointed by the governor. So what they would say is you can't pursue causes of action for price gouging under this statute because this is within the purview of the Public Utility Commission. Now, that said, it seems like the state is actually, this is one of the few issues with all this that I think that they're going to address. I know that Gritty, there was a lot of uproar because Gritty, which was one of the utilities that was in the market, was 100% passing on all the costs of the increased variable electricity rates to consumers. And I think I read that the state has already basically banned Gritty from doing business out here because of that. As I understand, the state has decided that they're not going to cut off anybody's electricity for non-payment. And two, they're going to do something to actually address the cost to ensure that they don't get passed on to the consumer. But the short answer, Bobby, is it likely doesn't apply for the reason that I just explained, but no court has yet ruled on it. So it may be something to take up, and we're still investigating the issue.
Are there any other questions that we have the county attorney who is doing, all I have to say is our young leadership at Harris County, be it Lena Hidalgo, Christian Menefee, are under heavy fire from the beginning. Y'all are busy from day one. Let's go back to the original reason why we had you scheduled was, again, the sex trafficking and the dismissal because A, it was ineffective, but B, what are the other workarounds through civil to deal with some of the root causes of those trafficking issues in order to mitigate what's going on?
Sure. I mean, look, this is the same thing that happened way back under the Reagan administration all the way through Bush, and to be fair, even under President Bill Clinton. Yeah, we try to over penalize issues that really come from poverty, lack of education in certain communities, and that's really what the civil injunction was doing. Yeah, my biggest issue is in order to solve the problem of open and obvious sex work that goes on in certain communities, you have to invest in those communities soup to nuts, right? You have to invest in job training, you have to invest in education. And of course, you have to invest in fighting against the trafficking that's going on. I'm all for going against the traffickers, which means that you would need an increased police presence, increased prosecutions on those individuals. But to be clear, we need more resources. The state is not being serious about this. The example that I always use is the state loves to talk about human trafficking, right? You've heard the governor and the AG talk about it a lot. How much money annually does this state spend on human trafficking? I'll tell you what, it's nothing in comparison to what we spend on the border, right? We spend over $800 million as a state on border patrol. We spend a fraction of that on fighting human trafficking issues. So if we're going to be serious about fixing these problems, we're going to have to invest in services for the people in these communities, soup the nuts across the board, one. And then two, when that's done, we also need to have state funding so that we can have an increased presence there to go after the people who are really the bad actors here. I don't believe in using the state resources to bring civil actions against women who are engaged in sex work. I think that the real folks who need to be focused on that situation are the traffickers.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? Hearing none.
I have a little question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Menefee, for joining us. And I guess this is a question for all of us. I got a flat tire the other day by 59 in Bissonnet, and I found a tire shop right there in Bissonnet, and it just really opened up my eyes because there was this pimp that got pulled over right at the tire shop, and there was like 3-4 police cars there, while all these women in basically walking in underwear were just passing by in Bissonnet. What's happening with, like, what can we do or help these people, or what can we do in this movement? Because it's just so apparent here in the southwest side. Is it city council or what can we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I've acknowledged since the beginning that the open and obvious stuff that goes on out there, that's the real problem, right? There's a school over there, and I've talked with the principal of the school. Kids shouldn't have to, on their way to school, see people engaging in sex acts or, women half dressed. So it is a real problem. I hate giving the answer that the only answer that bringing a civil lawsuit is not the answer. It almost sounds like, well, it's not my problem. And that's not what I'm trying to say at all. But I do think that this is an issue that needs to be impacted by 1, city council, 2, the police department, and 3, the DA's office, right? If we're not going to, as from a criminal perspective, if we're not focused on sting operations to identify and arrest the folks who are pimps out there, to get them off the street, and to stop their practices of coercing women to engage in these practices, if we're not going to do that from a criminal perspective, nothing else matters, right? Because that's the true deterrent. If there's no criminal punishment for going out there, for recruiting women, for forcing them to stand on the street, then me bringing a civil action isn't going to change anything that's going out there. So I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I'll tell you, I'm meeting with a pastor over at Higher Dimension about the issue to try to continue to talk about it and see what a solution can be. But I know that whatever the solution is, it's going to take a group of policymakers from various levels of government putting resources into that community. Because I think what's happening, Ivan, is it's pretty much been like, all right, look, this isn't an issue that affects everybody across the city. This issue only affects this neighborhood. So let's just kind of pack it over there, turn our eyes away from it, and not be concerned with it. So I think we have to be smart about solutions. I don't know what the answer is today, but I certainly and my office are ready to keep the conversation going and talk about how to fix it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Everyone, please give Christian a big old round of applause and our county attorney for joining us today. I know you're really, really busy. We appreciate so much for you joining us this morning.
Thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
And now for the other part of the meeting, I'm going to turn this over to Judge Tanya Garrison, who will be doing a presentation. We're calling it Civics 301, the Judiciary. Take it away, Tanya.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you all for being here today. I'm looking at the number of participants, and I want to believe that you all showed up to hear me drone on and on and on about the third branch of government, but my guess is you probably were here to hear Christian because he is amazing. So thank you, Christian, for everything you're doing. And Adrian, I don't know, do I have a screen share ability? Because I have a PowerPoint that goes along with what I'm going to talk about.
You are a co-host. You should have screen share ability.
Okay, cool. All right, good deal. And I don't mean to bore you guys all with a PowerPoint. So I tried to make it a little juicy. It's not juicy at all. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the judiciary, right? Which to me is the coolest branch of government. But to a lot of people, you're probably, it's not near as exciting. It doesn't get near as much press. It's, there's no CNN correspondent that covers the judiciary. It's just, it's slower. And it's just a little bit different, but it's actually, I think, the most important branch because it's kind of like, as we've all learned in the last year, the last stop, right? I mean, it's the branch that is the safekeeper of everything that we think is important about the Constitution and our way of government. So, yay! And I got to tell you, the other thing is, I love whenever I'm on one of these Zoom presentations, because I get to see everybody's house and like their background. So like Judge Semino, that is just a beautiful, I guess it's a mirror, maybe it's your fireplace, but just super gorgeous. And so many, it's like I get to know you a little bit better. But I do agree with Judge Dollinger, who posted that he can't wait to see everybody back in live person. So let's just get started if I can get this done here. So partially this is going to be, I'm going to talk a little bit about the third branch of government, but also I'm trying to get this top thing moved. If you know how to do that, let me know so that I can start the slideshow. Does anybody know how to do that?
Just hit F5.
F5. Thank you, Fran. God, I love when there's smarter people than me on the phone. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk about the judiciary, how it's set up locally, state, and the federal system really kind of mirrors a lot, or I guess the state mirrors the federal system. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But then the other thing I really want to talk about is kind of like, what is important about your judges and why, just this sort of my perspective on how judges do what they do and what makes a good judge. I always found it interesting is when we would campaign, because, in Texas, we elect judges, is that it was like we all get up and say the same things. We believe in truth, justice, and the American way, freedom, liberty, equal treatment of everyone under the law. Well, if that's all it is, then, every ninth grade civics student could be a judge. It's a lot more than that. And I want to give you ultimately the tools to talk to these people, including myself, who are running for judge in order to make a determination as to whether or not you think they would be good at the job. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to talk about how courts are organized in Texas. So if you think of it, and I apologize in advance, in addition to sucking at screen sharing on Zoom, I also am not that good at PowerPoint. So ignore all the extra lines and the mistakes and just work with me. We're going to make this work. But you can see how it's set up in sort of a hierarchical system. And at the very top, we have two ultimate courts of authority in Texas. The Texas Supreme Court, which is the ultimate authority for civil matters and family law matters. And then the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is sort of like the Supreme Court. They're sister courts, but it deals with criminal issues, juvenile issues that come through the criminal system. That is unique to Texas. That is not something that exists in the federal system. In the federal system, they don't divide the courts out between civil and criminal issues. All courts handle all of those issues. But in Texas, then if you come down to the next level, so this is the Court of Appeals. The courts of appeals, there's 14 in the state of Texas. They are the intermediate court that reviews everything from everything underneath there. In a way, they're kind of like my boss, right? They review everything I do. And when an issue comes out of a district court or a county criminal court at law, every party has a right to a intermediate review with the Court of Appeals. So when you've met candidates who are running for like the 1st or 14th courts of appeals, this is the court that reviews the trial court's decisions here in Harris County. And then you can see underneath it, I have all these other areas of courts that we have here in Houston. So, so for example, and I'm just going to start throwing names out because you remember their names. You know how when they all stand up and introduce themselves, they'll say, "Oh, I'm the judge of the 157th," and you're like, "What does that even mean?" It means very little. So I might use names, and it's just because that's who's jumping to my mind. But like the family district courts, for example, like Judge Angela Graves Harrington or Jermaine Tanner, that's who's over in the family courts. Then you have your juvenile courts that handle CPS dockets and criminal matters involving juveniles. Michelle Moore, Leah Shapiro, Natalia Oakes, they're over there in the juvenile. Civil district courts, that's myself, Judge Dollinger, the Civil 10, as we like to call ourselves, but Judge Engelhardt as well. Then we have the criminal district courts, which handle felonies. Judge Silverman, a few others, I think was Natalia, not Natalia, somebody else, I can't remember who just got elected. Oh goodness, but criminal district courts, they handle our felony charges. Then we have, those are state courts. Then we have county courts. So when they get up and introduce themselves, they'll have a number like County Civil Court at Law number 1 or number 2. Those are, they are not state courts. They are courts that are administered by Commissioner's Court. And in the civil side, they handle cases that are of a smaller dollar level, that are on more of a fast track. There's a few things that have exclusive jurisdiction in the county civil courts at law. Then there's also the county criminal courts at law, which handle misdemeanor charges. Another one I did leave off, but I didn't, I'm reminded because of his beautiful fireplace mantle, are our probate courts. Probate courts are also county courts. There's probate court 1, 2, 3, and 4. They handle exclusively probate and guardianship matters. Then you'll see underneath it, underneath those 2 county boxes, I have the words JP and municipal courts. The JP court is what you traditionally think of as like small claims court. And so it's anything under a certain dollar level or evictions. Evictions have, the JP court has exclusive jurisdiction, and that's done by statute over eviction matters. Municipal courts are going to be violations of city ordinances. So it's usually a lot of low-level traffic violations or like sound ordinances or maybe like a pollution ordinance. So those are handled by the municipal courts. And then if you kind of do it in the backwards order, that's how these issues get appealed. So like if you take the civil district courts, me, when I make a decision, if the parties don't like it, they have a right to an automatic appeal by the Court of Appeals. They have a mandatory right to it. I mean, the Court of Appeals has to hear that case. However, if they don't like that decision and they go to the Texas Supreme Court, they are a court of permissive jurisdiction, which means they kind of get to sort through the cases to decide which ones they want to hear and which ones they don't want to hear. And there's rules and statutes about how all of this is done. So what kind of issues do the courts decide? I've talked a little bit about this, so I'll go through fast, but courts decide felony and misdemeanor criminal charges. The family courts deal with divorce, adoption, family violence restraining orders. In Harris County, we have a specific court that deals with that. That's Judge Barbara Stalder's court. And then CPS dockets. We have our juvenile courts, which I mentioned earlier, criminal matters involving kids, and they have a CPS docket as well. Civil courts handle all commercial, contract, personal injury, real estate, and basically anything that doesn't fall in the other ones kind of comes to the civil courts as a last resort. However, most of us, when you use the word district court, we are interchangeable, which means that we are courts of general jurisdiction. So for example, I can sit as a judge for Judge Silverman in his criminal docket. Now, that would be probably disastrous for everyone because I don't know the criminal justice system. I don't know I don't know the procedures and the rules and the laws. But if he needed me, I would jump at the opportunity and do it in a minute. So why does it matter who we elect as judges? You know, if you think of Lady Justice, right, holding her scales, she's blindfolded. And that's because it's not supposed to matter who you are or where you come from when you come before the court. But we all know that that's not true. And a lot of times people ask me, why does it matter if we elect Democratic judges or Republican judges, or why does that make any difference? Because it shouldn't, but ultimately it does. And I think the biggest reason is perspective. When somebody is making a decision about what to do in any given predicament, you want somebody that shares a similar perspective, worldview that you have. I remember when I was a little kid and I asked my mom the difference between Republicans and Democrats. She said, Democrats care about people and Republicans care about making money. Now, I don't know if that's true or false, and it's probably an overgeneralization, but it made sense to probably an 8-year-old little kid. So who do you want making that decision? As you know, we had the bail bonds controversy going on, and there definitely was sort of a partisan divide on how that should be going forward. That's still kind of working its way through the court system, so I won't really comment on that. Chapter 33 of the Texas Family Code is what's called a bypass. The bypass provision, as you all know, there are in Texas, if a minor is seeking an abortion, they have to have parental consent. This is the provision that allows them to bypass that consent if a court approves the application. So who do you want deciding those things, right? That's a perspective issue. Name and gender marker changes. Again, perspective really matters on this. I tend to think, and this maybe isn't 100% fair, but that perspective that we're talking about is that when you're looking at the world through the lens of how to protect people, when you view these amendments in the Bill of Rights, it makes a difference. And then there's equal rights issues that obviously, again, it's just how you treat people. So I do think it matters. So what I want to talk though a little bit more about is how judges go about making decisions. And you know, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but earlier in the year, well, I guess it was 2 years ago now, I was presented, it ended up in my court, a very controversial issue. And I can't comment on it because it's still a pending case. But after I made my decision, I had to deal with a number of difficult things. And a former judge gave me this really awesome book called Tough Decisions. And it talks about how judges go about making tough decisions. And so I want to share some of this with you because I think it's really insightful. And I think it gives you a really good map of how to dive into a person or a candidate's decision-making process or their way of thinking or their perspective when it comes to important decisions. So here's what happened. In Washington State, there was this thing called the I-95 initiative. And I don't understand it exactly, but basically there was a huge tax that people had to pay when they bought a car. And it was really unfair, and it was expensive, and it was messed up, but it provided a lot of revenue to the state. So the voters introduced a proposition to change that way vehicles are taxed to like a $50 flat fee when you buy a car. This is how you have to pay it. It gets passed, but then there's of course a challenge. There's two competing sides on this. Side one is the environmental lobby, who is very against the change because the revenue that those taxes provided went to climate change reform, went to environmental causes, went to preservation. And so they were very jazzed up about this. On the other side were consumer rights and advocates in that respect. So it was very hard fought out, and this case eventually lands up before Judge Robert Alsdorf in Washington State. So like me, he was a publicly elected trial judge, which they don't run on a partisan basis, but my understanding is the way it works in Washington, every voter gets a sample ballot, And the ballot also indicates who you've been endorsed by, right? So like if you've been endorsed by the GLBT caucus, it's probably a good bet as to what political party you're in. So I talked about the voter initiative. This constitutional challenge arises. There's public outcry, and Judge Alsdorf is asked to resolve this dispute. Now, the first thing, and my colleagues and I talk about this all the time, when a juicy case comes up, the first thing any of us say is, please God, do not let this come before me, right? I don't want to deal with it. And so what happens to Judge Alsdorf is a senior member of the court comes and says, hey, you know what, why don't I just handle this for you? And then you don't have to run the risk of being punished by the voters for making this decision that people aren't going to like. And that's really tempting, but it's wrong. And the reason it's wrong is because Canon 3 of the Judicial Code of Ethics basically tells you under B1, a judge shall, that means must, you have no choice. A judge shall hear and decide matters assigned to the judge, except in which those that they're disqualified. And disqualification is rare, okay? Recusal is rare. You shall decide those cases. So you can't run away from it. You need to do your job. And let's be real about this. Don't you all want a judge who's willing to take a risk and decide on a difficult issue even when they don't want to? I don't want the judge that puts their tail between their legs and runs away and is a big chicken. I want a judge that's going to do their job, even if it may hurt. And Judge Alsdorf talks about how he resolves sort of how he goes through this decision-making process. And some of the things that he talked about were really resonating to me. And the first idea is that I am not paid to be right. I am paid to be fair. Okay, what is right? Morally right, ethically right, legally right. That's a very amorphous concept. And sometimes the three don't match up. You pay your policymakers to be right. You pay your judiciary to be fair and make sure that everyone receives their day in court. It's not the what, but the how, okay? That is, you want to make sure that every case gets a fair trial, goes through the same process, and that you as a judge are applying the same rules to everyone. You know, there's a great quote, and I'm going to mess it up, from a Supreme Court case that talks about the First Amendment. And it says, if you're really an advocate of the First Amendment, you have to defend that which you find detestable as much as that you find admirable. Judges are the same thing. There can be somebody standing before me that I find to be detestable, or have a position that I find to be detestable. And I have to give them the same rights, the same due process as everybody else. And then, of course, we've all heard the term activist judge, which nobody wants. And the way I view the word activist judge is you start with a belief about what is right, and you find a way to get there, as opposed to starting with a neutral approach and going through due process, going through the process so that everyone gets their say in order to make a determination. The next thing that Judge Alsdorf talks about is, again, this I think is kind of a perspective issue. How do you view the people before you and recognize that maybe the most important person in the courtroom is the guy that's going to lose? You need to consider things from that perspective, because you have to make sure that there is no bias and you are considering both sides. You know, oftentimes in courts, the court has to make a decision. Let's say you have a contract dispute and one side says, I owe you no money, and the other side says, I owe you $100,000. And you're negotiating, and the negotiations are somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000. Well, the judge isn't going to come in and say, okay, 60 grand is the answer. The judge is going to go with 0 or 100. One side will lose and one side will win. So you have to make sure that both sides have received the same opportunity to make their case. then I think the judge, has an obligation to make sure that both parties feel that they were heard. This is very important to me, and I try to end every hearing, every court proceeding that I have by saying very important words, which are, does anyone else have anything else they'd like to say or like the court to consider before we conclude this hearing? Just to make sure that everybody feels that they got their chance. Then there are things that you can do, obviously, to acknowledge sort of that losing position and show empathy for that losing party. Most of this comes by way of explanation. Sometimes people, no, they always hate to lose, okay? Nobody likes to lose. But if they understand why, that goes a long way. The next thing that I learned from Judge Alsdorf is that every case and every hearing, every matter that comes before you has a legal issue ultimately that the court is going to decide. So how do you frame it? How do you break it down to decide what is it I really need? What is the decision I really need to make here? Is it procedural? Is it substantive? How is it framed? I found this to be a really great tool because a lot of times the lawyers get very passionate. They're advocating their cause and they can't focus on what's necessary. And I say, counsel, this is how I frame the legal issue. Do you think I'm right or should I change it? What's the ultimate issue we need to decide here? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we've all heard this acronym, KISS, right? It usually makes me think of Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, but it's not. It means keep it simple, stupid. Usually, there's a very simple issue at the end of the day. How do we focus on that so we can get to the right result? In many cases, there's thousands of pages of legal briefing and case precedent that a court must consider. The court has to be able to deconstruct that and then reconstruct it in the framework of the case before them. Ultimately, a judge has to do their homework and make a decision. Parties want and need a decision. That is what you are there to do. So after you do all these things, you go through this process, you have to make a call. I want a judge that makes a call. I think everybody else does too. Judges that don't make a call, I mean, there's a time and a place to defer a call or delay a call, but it's rare. Parties want a decision, that's why they're standing in front of you. And then, of course, perform a final check on the decision you're about to make. Everybody needs to check themselves at the door, and are they using any implicit bias? We hear this term a lot. A lot of times it's talking about implicit bias in the realm of race or gender or some sort of something along those lines, but it's more than that. Do you have an implicit bias because maybe you prefer one side of the docket or the other, or that's what you used to practice for, so you feel more sympathy for that side, or maybe that's what you used to practice so you feel more sympathy for the other side. You just got to check yourself at the door to make sure you're not doing it. In a big decision where it's not something simple that you can just handle, you need to sort of run the analysis backwards, start with the decision and kind of like the chart I showed you before. This is how it goes the first time, this is how it goes the second time, just to make sure that you don't have that bias. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we hear a lot about this because we talked about the oaths that lawmakers and members of the executive branch take, but so does the judiciary. And that it's, I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of judge of the state of Texas, and will do so to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state. So help me God. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is what I have to make my peace with. So what does this mean? Okay, Justice Sarah Beth Landau, if you remember her, she ran in 2018 with us. She's a judge on the First Court of Appeals. I went to her investiture and she said something that has stuck with me like glue. And that is, I sometimes have to make decisions that I don't like, decisions that I do not think are right, but I have to remember that as a judge, I don't represent the plaintiff, I don't represent the defendant, I represent the law. And the law is where my duty lies. It's just, that's an amazing way to encapsulate the job of a judge. So I'll tell you two other stories that were in that book that I mentioned. And the first is of Judge Jennifer Bailey, who was a Florida family judge. And she decided the case of Ilian Gonzalez. If you remember, this was back in the 90s. So little boy and his mom escaped from Cuba. They're on a raft. They are trying to get to Florida, obviously hit bad weather. The little boy survives, but all of the adults die on this journey. The Florida family of Ilian Gonzalez take him in and start court proceedings to keep him in the United States. However, the boy's father back in Cuba is trying to get him back to Cuba. So huge amount of press, huge case, very interesting case. But this is what Judge Bailey says. I had to remember that my obligation was to the law and to one small boy, not to the competing politics of the clamoring voices, despite my status as an elected judge who would need their votes in the future. The critical point of these inquiries was to meet my obligation and to uphold the law. Judges should not twist the facts or bend the law to achieve a popular result. She goes on and she says, this is a case that has always stayed with me. I know that if I followed the law and kept my oath, doing so ensured a little boy would grow up with his father and his family. But my decision also cost that little boy the American freedom that his Miami relatives sought for him. It was the correct result under the law. Whether it was right in the end depends on each of us for what we value most. And it gets back to that same thing I was talking about earlier, which is I'm paid to be fair, not to be right. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that as a judge, you have to be willing to do certain things. And the biggest one is stand up to your critics. Oftentimes in what you do, the public is interested and the public thinks that they have a right to they have a say on what your decision is going to be. And what the public sometimes doesn't realize is that you're not a policymaker. I don't get to write the laws. I have to enforce the laws. Unfortunately for judges, when we make decisions that are unpopular because of the judicial canons of ethics, we can say nothing. I can't comment on it. I can't tell you more than what is in the public record. But you still have to be willing to stand on your own 2 feet. And so how do you do that? Especially because sometimes the critics are the people you think are on your side. Okay, so look, I'm a liberal Democrat. I have certain political beliefs that lead me one way. Many of you on this Zoom conference and I probably line up in many respects. But I may have to make a decision that goes against those because that's what the law is. Well, you might not like it. What you should like is the fact that I'm willing to do it when it comports with the law as it is written. And I'll tell you, this is another really cool story of Judge George Greer, who was the judge on the Terry Schiavo case. If you remember that one, okay, again, you got to go back to the 90s. Terry Schiavo was put on life support. But her life support was really just food and water. Her husband had said several times that if she ever was in this sort of state, she was brain dead, that she would want life support to be terminated, and her parents disagreed, and there was a big fight. And it went into the court system. And Judge Greer was assigned to this court, assigned to this case. And when he tells the story, he says, actually, legally, the decision was very easy because after he reviewed the evidence, everything lined up to say that the husband had the right, and the evidence supported that Terry Schiavo's actually decision was to terminate this life support. But that's not how it ended up. It went through the court system over and over again. The pro-life movement kind of tacked onto it, and it became something bigger than it ever was intended. And if you'll recall, the United States Congress even called a special session to consider this one issue. Tom DeLay was the Speaker of the House at the time, and he calls back Congress to pass one law to affect this one decision that this one judge has made. And this judge, who was a Republican elected judge, said, I remember sitting in my kitchen, and as a lifelong Republican who had devoted my life to the Republican Party, I'm watching the leader of the Republican Party stand on the floor of the United States Congress and call me a devil. And you know what he did? He kept his decision the same. He didn't fall down. He didn't balk. He stood tall and on his own 2 feet. It even went further. He and his wife had been lifelong members of a conservative Christian church in their city. The church threw them out. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, obviously I don't belong to a church that's a conservative Christian church, but if my church threw me out because of the fact that I was doing my job, and you know what you got to be able to do? You got to be willing to stand up and go, well, that's just how it works. I'm still going to stand by my decision. Back to Judge Alsdorf. He poses a question, which is, what gives the judge the right to overrule the voters? He says it's a very reasonable question for people to ask. What is this one person doing, overruling the will of the voters? And what he says is, any one judge is not just one man. The best way to explain it is to say that if I'm doing my job right, I'm not the voice of one man. I study the Constitution. I study 100 years of decisions by our elected Supreme Court justices. And so when I do my job right, it is the voice of one person, but it really is the voice of the law developed over hundreds and hundreds of years. So where I promised I would get to ultimately in this presentation is, what should you do? How do you make sure that the people who stand in front of you aren't just getting up and saying truth, justice, and the American way? Okay. Look, the reality is that we elect judges. I call it the purity test. Are you a good Democrat? First, I want to know that, right? Do you have the same perspective as me? That's an important consideration. I want Democrats elected, but I want people who are good at this job elected, because that really does matter. Here's some questions I would ask candidates. Describe a time in your life when you had to make a hard decision, and how did you go about analyzing the problem? Oh, and by the way, I'm going to pose 3 of these questions for you. And I'm going to start by just saying, look, first off, there's no wrong or right answer to any of them. Okay? The truth is, how do they deal with it? How do they answer these questions? Do they explain contemplative thought? Do they explain analyzing the problem on both sides? Do they consider the totality of the circumstances? So that's a really good question to ask someone. What's the most consequential decision from the Supreme Court that will affect your job? I think this is a good question, and you could change this around. Your favorite decision, your consequential decision, whatever you kind of wanted to make that good. And it could be the US Supreme Court, the Texas Supreme Court, it could be any court, I don't care. First, it demonstrates, does this candidate know their business? If they can't name one, well, shame on them, okay? If they say, oh, it's Roe versus Wade, because Roe versus Wade gave women the right to choose regarding their own healthcare decisions. That's true. I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe that. I believe that Roe versus Wade is a very important case. But again, any 9th grade civics student could answer that question. I want something different. I want to hear, maybe even if it's Roe versus Wade, maybe it's Roe versus Wade, and not for what it said, but maybe for what it didn't say. I agree with the late Justice Ginsburg when she says that Roe, while it achieved the right result, was decided under the 9th Amendment and really should have been decided under the 14th Amendment that guarantees due process to all people. And the reason is, if it had been decided under this 14th Amendment precedent, it would be a lot harder for states and state legislatures to enact laws that challenged it. Like, those 2 answers are fundamentally different. Now, I'll tell you, if you ask me this question, my answer changes all the time. If you asked me 6 months ago, I just had reread Bush v. Gore, which I found to be fascinating. I strongly urge you to go back and read it. It was just a great decision. If you ask me this today, it might just be what's on my case. There's a case called the City of Keller versus Wilson, which is a Texas Supreme Court decision talking about what is and what isn't evidence and how you analyze certain different pieces of evidence and testimony in order to determine if it's legally sufficient. Okay, none of you are interested. I just lost everybody's attention when I started talking about that. But the reality is if I asked a candidate and they could give me that kind of an answer with that kind of conviction, I'm all of a sudden going, yeah, they get this, right? Here's the last best question. Have you ever represented a client that you didn't like, and how did you handle that? That's a good question, because what did you do when presented with something that maybe wasn't right, but where you had to be fair? I just think those are some things you maybe could consider. Finally, a few things that you should remember about elected judges, and I'm saying this just to save face and make you still like me after all the things I just said. We don't make law, okay? We interpret law. If you asked me how I feel about the Green New Deal, my voice on that is only as good as yours, because I'm going to vote for candidates that believe the same way I do to the Congress. But it has nothing to do with me. In fact, I can't even really make a judgment on that and tell you about it publicly, because a certain aspect of the Green New Deal, if it ever was enacted in Texas, may come before me in my court. I have to be fair and impartial. Judges don't make policy, right? If you are a judge and you're making policy, you're doing it wrong. So we're people, okay? Sometimes we get it wrong. And that is why we have this very intricate process that is sort of a check to make sure that ultimately everything is compliant, that due process is upheld. So sometimes we get it wrong, but sometimes we get it right. Ginny's case is another case I want to talk about, Judge Gregory Mize out of the DC circuit. I think it was DC, maybe it was Maryland. But it was a case in which he had to terminate parental rights because the mother had a mental illness condition. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically where you hurt your child and then act as the child's savior, right? Then you're their Florence Nightingale so that you get attention to, but he had to terminate these rights. And ultimately it resulted where with this girl, Ginny, he terminated the mother's rights because she couldn't comply with all the things he was setting up to try to keep that relationship intact. She went to live with her father, got the mental health treatment that the child needed, and he read in the newspaper one day that the mother had actually committed suicide. But years later, he actually went and found Ginny and met with her to kind of just check and make sure that what he had done worked out okay for everybody. And despite the tragic consequences with the mother, this little girl had turned out okay. So with that, I would just say thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? The fact that you brought up Bo's case, I remember at that point, Majority Leader of the Senate, Dr. Bill Frist, making a remote diagnosis, trying to intervene, which was a violation of medical ethics because he was not the attending physician. So that was a truly political case that you brought up there.
Yeah, the politics are there. The question is, what does the judge do with the politics? And even though this is a judge who probably, if I lived in his district in Florida, never would have voted for him. But I admire him because he stood by his guns. Like that's what you want, even when it goes against you. Even if you're the losing side of a case, you want a judge that just does it right.
Judge Engelhardt?
I don't have a question per se. I just want to make 2 points. First of all, as I said in the comments, we are so lucky to have Judge Garrison in Harris County. You all don't even realize she works so tirelessly, not just as a judge, but to make the entire judiciary better, to take care of us, to She never, ever, ever says no to a request. And when someone asks for help, she's the first one to come on and say, I will help, I'll do it. And so we actually need to stop asking her because she's so nice and so energetic that she will not say no. So we need to give her a break. That's the first thing. Oh, and then
I also paid him $20 to say that.
Funny, but you think you think at $20? That's where I am, $20?
Yeah.
All right, fine. Take back what I said. But also the presentation was great and I loved all the anecdotes and examples. It was so thorough and well prepared. I loved it. And then one other thing about what Judge Garrison just said about judges making tough calls and and the judge in Florida that had to make a very difficult political decision or decision that might actually go against their politics. And this is not self-serving, although it sounds like it. Judges need, even state judges, we always talk about how we select our judges. I think it would be a vast improvement if while it's important I think democracy is important. I've always been in favor of democracy. But we need to find a way to make judges a little bit more secure in their positions, in one way or another, so that it is easier for us to make the tough calls. One of the great things about a lifetime appointment for a federal district court or appellate judge is they are completely immunized from politics and can serve faithfully the United States Constitution and laws as opposed to constituents or worrying about being reelected. Now, there was an appellate judge, I went to a presentation at Brennan's several years ago who was, I think, retiring or getting an award and said, I need to, being a judge means every day going into work knowing you could make a decision that will end your career. And that's true, but it's also, and we do have to make tough calls from time to time. Most of them are routine, but from time to time we have to make really tough calls that could be in the front page of the Houston Chronicle or Wayne Dolcefino's radar, and could end our careers. But I think that we should come up with find a way to make state district judges a little more insulated from that so that they can be more comfortable making tough calls when necessary. I'm done.
Also, I'll tell you, I'm excited to hear your announcement about 2022. I'm wondering, are you pregnant?
I am only a little bit pregnant.
And I'm just kidding. I can't let it, I will take your compliments. So thank you for saying that, Judge Englehart. I think you're one of the best too. I've always thought that even when I was a practitioner in front of you. So thank you very much. That means a lot to me. But the one part I will take is I just really love joking around with everyone I work with. I've never met a wisecrack I wasn't willing to make. So anyway.
Are there any other questions for Judge Garrison?
Someone named Gina has their hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Gina.
Sorry, my eyes are having to do the Zoom squint.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I have a very general question. The Voting Rights Act was gutted, the original one, and there's a new act that's in process. But there are a lot of laws coming out now that seem to be voter suppression laws. What do you think the judiciary can do about those laws in advance of this?
The real answer is we can do nothing about that. I can only resolve cases and controversies that come before me. I don't get to propose legislation. I don't get to vote on legislation. I don't get to enact legislation. And if I were to even take a position on that, so right, you do ultimately, like idealistically, we do want Lady Liberty with the blindfold on. And let's say I'm the judge and I'm writing legislation and I'm advocating for policy, and that issue comes before the court. I'm no longer with the blindfold on. I'm no longer Lady Liberty and able to give both sides due process rights. I'm now, and probably would get recused off a case and probably draw an ethical challenge with the Board of Judicial Conduct if a judge takes an active part in that. Now, how I vote, right? What I believe in my core is probably much like you. But I just, right, judges are still people. I get one vote on who I elect to be in the state legislature, who my congressional representatives are. So the judiciary can have almost no role in that until the lawsuit is brought and the challenge is made. And then you just have to see what it's going to be, right?
Are there any other questions for Judge Garrison?
So Mark Harrison?
Yeah.
Okay. This is
it's actually
Judge.
It's actually for Judge Garrison and Judge Engelhardt and any of the judges. Judge Engelhardt brought up the longer terms for judges or giving them, I mean, so where would they sit if they were elected to a 10-year term instead of a 4-year term? And then is that possible? There are other states that do that.
Yeah.
Because that would seem like that would give you some breathing room at least.
So, look, I want to keep my job. I wish I could have a lifetime appointment now that I have my job. But 3 years ago, when I was trying to get my job, I was really glad that we had elections so that we can have different voices and different people, right? So, should the term be longer? I don't know. The Court of Appeals, they are 6-year terms. Right. In the federal system, it's a lifetime appointment, which, as a practicing lawyer, I could tell you had a lot of drawbacks because the one thing about being an elected judge is that, y'all get to keep me honest to a certain perspective, to a certain point. I mean, if I get the black robe disease, y'all get to call me out on it, right? In the federal system, you don't get to call people out on it. But then there's the added benefit of there's no political pressure for federal judges. They talk about these Trump appointee judges that ruled against Trump policies. Well, they had insulation and security to make those decisions. And they should all have done the right thing regardless, but we're all people. So there's also some ideas about retention elections, which is where the judge is appointed and then they come up every 4 years for a retention, like hire or fire the judge, like you just vote him up or down. Well, again, that depends on who appoints him. If Beto O'Rourke becomes our next governor, yay. And I'm sure his appointments will be fantastic, but I'm not sure I feel the same way about Governor Abbott. So I don't think it's a perfect answer on this.
Yeah, and even though we're Democrats, it doesn't mean we can't make mistakes in appointments. I mean, it can happen. You can, right? And so I just wondered if maybe a 10-year term would be something that would be better.
Wait, I mean, there was just a commission that finished its work and discussed a lot of these issues. And if you have 2 lawyers in a room, you will have at least 4 or 5 different opinions about this topic. The answers are not simple. They're really not, because every different direction you go is fraught with peril, and especially for one side or the other. People talk. I've long said, and I've been print on this about the potential upside of removing party ID from judges, and there is some upside to just elect it, because then perhaps you're not elected. Your primary, winning your primary is not as central, and so being the most partisan Democrat or the most partisan Republican is not quite as important. But on the other hand, voters know so little about judicial candidates as it is that that's the one thing they do know is your partisan alignment. And so if we take away parties, it may very well be that only people named Smith and Martinez and us have certain other characteristics in their name will win. Names with colors like green and brown do exceptionally well at the voting booth, just historically. And so, those we could have only judges with very simple, straightforward last names, and that's not very good for diversity or having a bench that looks like Harris County. So,
Right.
you know, there's lots of questions, a lot more questions than good answers.
I think that's part of the reason I enjoy giving this presentation so much, is because you guys are all very educated voters. You're involved, you know, like you're the cream of the crop of as far as educated voters are concerned. But sometimes like these things, like I mean, I've been to a million Democratic club meetings where the line of candidates stand up. Oh, sorry, dogs. Sorry. But where you go, I'm Tanya Garrison running for the 157th, and I believe everyone should be treated fair. And then they go, I'm Mike Engelhardt running for the 151st, and I believe in equality for everyone. I'm Jerry Semino running for Probate Court number 1. And the next thing you know, you're like, what are those numbers? What does it even mean? Is to have that one-on-one conversation with your publicly elected officials to say, are you good at your job? Right? Not a bar poll, not a, are you satisfied in your heart that they're doing the right thing, that they're good at their job? Because you're not down at the courthouse. I hope none of you ever end up down at the courthouse except to serve on a jury, okay, or as a lawyer. But you don't want to be a party to a lawsuit. You don't want to be part of litigation, or charged with a crime or a victim of crime. So I hope you never end up down there. So you just have to have some faith that it's working the way it's supposed to. So somebody else had a question.
I want to say everybody.
Wait, no, sorry, that was the last question. I want to thank you very much for that. We've been joined by State Senator Borris Miles, and I would like to bring him in at this point because I know there are other issues. Did I lose y'all? Okay.
I didn't quite hear your Adrian, your entire statement.
Senator, would you like to give a quick, first, thank you very much, Judge Garrison, for the Civics 301 and the Judiciary. We absolutely need to understand how the Judiciary works, the process, and all of that. So thank you for doing that. Again, part of how we educate our membership and the broader public on how all these things work together. So thank you very much. Senator Miles?
Yes.
Thank you for joining the meeting. Do you have, I know that we've had a very challenging last few weeks in the county. Do you have any update?
We've had a very challenging week in the House and in the Senate at the state level. As many of you know, we had hearings. The one in the Senate was a 2-long-day hearing with Urquhart, with the PUC, and with local providers, and with a geologist, quite honestly, to try to get our hands around what could have been done better to prevent what I call a man-made disaster in the freeze. And let me make it very, very clear to you, very clear to you. The state of Texas had enough ample time to prepare their energy grids. The state of Texas had enough time to prepare their wind meters. The state of Texas had enough time to prepare their generators. Okay, this is nothing simply, and I said it on the Senate floor yesterday. This is nothing simply but the fox watching the hen house, if you know what I mean. You've got 16 Urquhart representatives on that board, all 8 of them which have resigned now, all of which are in the industry and oil business in some kind of way, all of which were affected in a very positive way by the blackout. But the thing that I would like to assure you the most is, I can assure you that $50 billion tax, that $50 billion tax or fee will be passed on to us in some kind of way over a period of time, which to me is just doggone right criminal. Okay, it's no doubt in my mind that they colluded together, and They knew this was going to happen. You can't tell me no. And you guys knew this was going to happen over a month ago. Okay. In 2011, as you know, the federal energy regulations asked them to put together a weatherization so that we could basically an upkeep on our grid and our windmills and our backups. Well, and since 2011, that was never done. But yet they went to workshops every year, but nobody ever brought or sought to bring it to the table for a vote. Okay, so we're going to be facing some very difficult times, and it's not over. We had the hearings for the last 2 days till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, but there's going to have to be a lot more done here. We're going to have to put some stop gaps. We're going to have to put in some things that whistleblowers. We're going to have to put in all types of things to secure that this never happens to the citizens of Texas again. Look, y'all, we've gone through COVID. We've gone through hurricanes. It's sad when we have to go through a man-made disaster. Man-made. This could have all been prevented. There were several testimonies that said this could have been prevented. Okay, Encore, the CFO of Encore laid it out on the line and just said, "Hey, look, this could have been prevented." You actually had energy facility companies when they knew that they weren't going to be able to provide enough energy to their territory. They stopped providing the energy, and they put that energy on the market, okay, to make $600 or in some cases $9,000 a kilowatt on the backs of us. But yet they want us to come back around and pay the bill. I would advise all of you, if you've got your electricity bill on automatic pay, I'd advise you as soon as you get off this phone to hang up and take it off automatic pay. I would advise that, because if the money's in the account when they send you this invoice, it's going to be sucked out. I don't know about you, but I'm willing to argue and fight for mine, and don't make it so easy for them to get it. How about y'all? Okay, so in addition to having this man-made disaster we're dealing with, don't forget we've got COVID going on, and please don't ever forget we've got redistricting that we still have to face. We still have to face. And I was listening to the conversation before I got on about judges and how their terms and how they're selected. We're dealing with a bill in Austin that allows the state of Texas, allows the governor to select judges, because they've seen how powerful that we've been and able to galvanize and get our people together and elect the judges who look like us and represent our communities. Okay, but don't forget, in the state, we may have federal lockdown now. We may have federal majorities in the Senate and in the House, but in Texas, we don't yet. And I always say, voting matters. Non-voting has consequences. We're not out of the woods yet. All the hard work for the voters that we put in, the votes that we put in to make sure we had judges elected that look like us, can be wiped out in one Senate, Texas Senate, one Texas House bill. So keep that in mind. We're going to be drinking water out of a fire hydrant this session. I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need y'all staying on top of the issues, because we have so many issues, and we have so many issues that are going to affect you directly. And it's almost like some of the Republicans think, well, this is our last time at bat. We better get everything we can get. Okay, and they're not afraid. They're not afraid. I'm sure some of you have been keeping up with some of the legislation that's already been filed. It's going to be a tough one. And it seems like they just keep throwing things at us to distract us from the real issues. Now they're saying we won't get our census information until May. Well, if that happens in May, then you can rest assured that the lines will be drawn by a redistricting commission. I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't want that. They've backed some of our congressional people up to the wall that says, look, we would like for you to consider voting for a bill to have a redistricting committee draw the lines. And I got a call from some of them on yesterday saying, well, it's not a bad idea, Borris. And I said, the hell if it's not a bad idea. Because if they get a commission here in the state of Texas, who do you think is going to appoint the commission? It ain't going to be none of y'all. So keep in mind, we've got a lot on our plates. We don't have time to drop the ball. We don't have time for us not to be informative. I think even more so now, we've got to, Adrian, we've got to stay in communications. We've got to spread around what's happening. We've got to get our e-chains going faster, because this session is going to be bogged down with a lot of major issues. Let's not even talk about, criminal justice reform. But I can tell you, as I've heard my Republican colleagues say, there won't be anything coming out of that Capitol with George Floyd's name on it. There won't be any chance of a Medicaid expansion. Okay, so I would just ask that y'all stay informed, stay in tune, stay in contact with us, so you'll know when I need you to come up. You'll know when we need to start sending email chains out to people. I mean, Ms. Foster does a very good job. Otis does a very good job in his camp over there. And they do a very good job of staying on top of things and getting information out. But, I'm only as strong as my people are. And I need you, and I welcome you, and I ask for your support, because it's going to be one tough sucker session. Yeah. But think about it. For the last 2 weeks, who's been talking about COVID? Nobody. We've been talking about getting energy and water back on. COVID's not dead. In the last 2 weeks, who's been talking about redistricting? Nobody. And these are things that are going to affect our lives for a long time. So I appreciate y'all having me here today. I see so many familiar faces. And I know that when I see y'all, I know that I'm not alone in the fight. You can drop me a line during the week at Austin and say, hey, how you doing? Get your spirits up. Because it gets tough sometimes. Okay? But we keep on drudging, we keep on pushing, we keep on fighting. As I always say, we're gonna keep the faith, keep the fight, and I'm willing to do that as long as I know I got your help.
Thank you. While we have you, Senator, we had County Attorney Christian Menefee on earlier, and he was talking about one of the questions that came up was on the price gouging. And he mentioned that electricity may not be considered a necessity according to the way the rules are written currently. Is there any idea in the Senate or in the House right now to make it to where electricity is mandated as a necessity?
The short answer to that is no, and I'll tell you why. Although the disdain is both coming from Republicans and Democrats. In the hearings on the last 2 days, I was very surprised with some of my Republican colleagues on how they drilled down into the chairman of Urquhart and how they treated the PUC chairwoman and all the smaller energy providers. It was definitely a bipartisan hearing. But at the end of the day, Adrian, as you know, at the end of the day, it comes down to what side of the aisle you're on, okay? When you're talking about saving people's money, when you're talking about issuing out people's money, then it becomes partisan again. So I think Menefee is right. We're not going to see a lot for price gouging, because I want you to think about this. I'll close it out in a humorous way. Jerry Jones' company, before the storm, was selling kilowatts at $3 a kilowatt. During and after the storm, he was selling kilowatts for $9,000 a kilowatt. Okay, you're a Dallas Cowboy. You're a Dallas Cowboy owner. I don't know anybody in the state of Texas that's going to stand up to him, not even the governor. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Does it make it pretty clear?
Pretty much.
And that's the unfortunate thing about this situation. But I leave you with saying, if your electricity bills are on automatic draft, I strongly recommend you take them off, so that you don't go to your bank one day and find your entire life savings is gone. Okay, your household budget is gone. But we're going to continue to, fight. There's some of us in the Senate that have sworn to stand by each other in a bipartisan way and do what's right. But along with that, we're still dealing with COVID. Like I said, we're still dealing with redistricting. Like I said, we're still dealing with criminal justice issues. Like I said, and it's going to be tough. But guess what? I'm ready for it. And I'm going to do as much as I can to keep y'all informed. And if you're not on my e-blast, my daily e-blast, please contact our office and we'll make sure that you are, because I like for everyone to be getting everything in real time. Okay? Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
No more questions. I thank y'all for always being supportive. I thank y'all for always being on top of things. I thank y'all for always allowing me the time that I need to share with you to make sure that we're all educated in these situations. I'm going to leave Ms. Foster, my trusty assistant, Ms. Foster, on the phone, my executive assistant, deputy chief of staff. I know, I saw that. I saw that, Gina. Some people would rather talk to her than talk to me. I dig it. I understand. Sometimes I'd rather talk to her than talk to myself. Okay. But I'll leave her on the line. And if you're not connected with us at all, please let her know and she'll get you connected. And look, Senate District 13 is one. No matter whether it's from the Northeast Kashmir Garden area all the way down south to Rosharon or all the way over to West Houston. Okay, it's still one. When I look at this screen, when I look at this Zoom screen, the diversity that I'm looking at, this is what Texas is all about. The diversity at the screen. Look at the screen you're looking at and look at the diversity on that screen. That's what makes Texas strong. We, from all different walks of life, is a strength in Texas. Okay, so y'all have a good one. Keep in mind, Senate District 13 strong. I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll all be in the fight together. Okay. Any other questions? No more questions.
Senator.
Yeah. Not a problem. I'm heading that way over to South. I'm going to be going over to South 7 acres over there to see my grandfather, right southwest. So y'all be good.
Thank you very much, Senator Miles. So I hope that today has been extremely informative across the board when it comes to what the county attorney is up to make sure that what his initiatives were and following through. We heard from Judge Garrison about how the judiciary functions and what questions we need to be asking of the candidates and how all of this fits into the broader part of government, which again, last month we covered Civics 201, how the legislative and executive branches work after they've been elected. And then we just heard from Senator Miles about, how hearings and what's going on with there. So there's a lot of moving pieces at all times. He brought up redistricting. I will tell you that there are a lot of conversations and actions that are being taken behind the scenes with a number of clubs trying to make sure that when the census numbers come out and the lines are drawn, that our voices are amplified together to make sure that there are fair maps and to make sure that representation at the congressional, at the state level, and the Senate district level continues or improves, because Texas is supposed to get additional seats. Harris County and Fort Bend County are supposed to get additional seats possibly in the state house. And so we just have to make sure that, the maps are fair That's the best we can hope for at the moment until we get more specific information. So, I mean, as the senator said, we're drinking from a fire hose when it comes to information. If you did not see last night, overnight, the United States House did vote for the COVID relief bill. And if you paid attention to the last Civics 201, and the reason why it took so long is because there was a debate in the Rules Committee about the rule bringing it to the floor that lasted 10 hours because they wanted the vote overnight. So they could say they're pushing through the bill in the dead hours of night. No, the Republicans held everything up for 10 hours in the Rules Committee because they wanted it to look suspicious. So now it goes to the Senate and that will proceed at that point. Procedure matters, unfortunately, which is why some of us watch procedure consistently so that we can tell you if you have a question about how things work and why they're doing things the way they're doing. This is it. So are there any other questions? Oh, wait, we had additional electeds join us after the ones earlier. Eric, you have I see Judge Davis. You want to say hi? Judge Davis.
Okay, I did see Judge Rogers.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me a chance to speak. I am overwhelmed with the amount of information that the Southwest Dems have supplied to all of us this morning. So thank you so much for all of that. And again, this is Dawn Rogers. I'm your judge in the 334th Civil District Court. Thank you, Southwest Dems, and thank you to all the speakers. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Let's see, I think Trustee Danny Norris is still online. Danny?
Yes, just been enjoying the meeting. So yes, thank y'all for having me and thank y'all for getting all the information out. So hope everybody's doing safe and everybody's well after a crazy week last week.
Thank you.
Judge Ursula Hall.
Happiness and health to everyone. And thank you for all that you're doing, Southwest Dems. Great civics lessons.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I don't know if she's still on the call. I did see Judge Tiiva Bell. Judge, are you still here? I don't see your name on the list anymore. She was here. And I think that's it.
Okay.
Real quick, if you want to recap this and watch the video again, I know there was a lot of good information in Judge Garrison's presentation. We will get it is on our Facebook page. It was streaming through our Facebook page. We will get that up onto YouTube within the week. Check back to our website.